Hello, everyone. Father Scott Vanderveer here with a reflection on grace, mercy, and compassion. Those things can be a little bit difficult to distinguish for us, and the definitions of them are actually rather helpful for us to understand, especially because we often talk about God's mercy, and it's hard to distinguish that from God's compassion. You might say, why does this matter? And I think you might find that thinking about it is a good way to sharpen our spiritual sense of certain things that are difficult to understand unless we really delve into them a little bit deeply. So let's begin by understanding the difference between grace, the grace of God, and mercy. So they're very related in some ways and opposites in others. Here's a good way to understand it. Grace is when God gives us what we don't deserve. And mercy is when God doesn't give us what we do deserve. Does that make sense almost right away? Maybe it does. Grace is a gift that God gives us that we don't deserve. God says, here's a beautiful sunset. Well, I wasn't supposed to be here this time of day, and I wasn't supposed to be on this street. And look at what God did for me. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, I wasn't even supposed to be here, and this beautiful thing happened? Grace may happen when you have a conversation you didn't expect, when an encounter with a cashier at a store fills you with delight because it was so wonderful and tender and joyful. Grace is when God gives us a gift that we didn't see coming. Mercy is when God doesn't give us a consequence that we've earned. Mercy is always showing a power imbalance. For mercy to be mercy, it can't be that we are needing to receive it from somebody, or that we can expect that this is what's due us. Mercy is when someone has every right to allow us to undergo a consequence or circumstance or reasonable reaction to whatever our first action was, and when they don't do it. So mercy is maybe given from a parent to a child, from a police officer to a speeder, to a boss to an employee. Mercy always involves someone with the power using the power to be kind and gentle to someone who doesn't have the power. So although the word mercy might be confusing for us sometimes, merciful is immediately understandable. Oh, when someone is merciful, they could give us an F on that paper because I turned it in late. But the teacher is instead generous and gives me maybe a C or maybe a warning, depending on what would best be the lesson for me to learn. So grace is when God gives us a gift that we didn't see coming. Mercy is when God holds back from something that would be a natural consequence. So when we talk about mercy, we need to distinguish it from compassion, because compassion is the feeling of big-heartedness and caring that is a part of every life. Not all of us can be merciful because not all of us are in a position of power, but all of us can be compassionate. And if we are compassionate, if we care about the suffering and the struggles of others, if we feel the sense of oneness, that they're a human being and I'm a human being, so what happens to them in some sense happens to me, then we're truly getting a chance to experience a little bit of the family feeling, the human commonality that is meant to make this world a beautiful place. When we recognize that what happens to you also happens to me, we give ourselves a chance to experience the true depth of connection that's possible. When we think of other people as completely separate from us or not as good as us, it's a sign that there's no compassion present. If we think someone isn't as good as us, if we look down on someone, we're missing the feeling of compassion. If we look at someone eye to eye and say, you may be in Myanmar across the globe and I may be in Glens Falls, but your plight is like mine. You breathe the same air and walk on the same ground and experience tiredness and loneliness and anger and frustration and joy and sorrow the way that I do. There it is. We recognize that we're all in this together. Grace is given to us by God. Mercy is when God holds back from something that would be coming our way. And compassion is something we share with everyone. You know, just as mercy can only be given by someone in a power position, I have a friend who likes to use the word grace in a similar way too. She'll say, I'm going to give you grace and know that you're doing the best you can. She might say, I'm going to ask that we give each other grace and know that nobody intended to hurt another person here. It's almost like her word for giving someone a generous assumption. I'm assuming goodwill on your part. I'm going to give you grace. I don't have to do that. So it is like the grace of God in a way. It's a gift that the other person might not have seen coming. Mercy is a form of restraint for a consequence or a circumstance that seemed inevitable. And compassion is the glue that keeps us all together, that reminds us we're all human beings and all of us can care about wanting other people not to suffer. I'd like to continue this reflection with a little bit of a further reflection about how empathy and compassion are different. So more on that in our next installment. In the meantime, may you experience an abundance of God's amazing grace. May you feel the depth of God's mercy and extend mercy to the people who look up to you and who depend on you for some role that you fulfill in their lives. And may we all have compassion for each other each and every day of our living. May God bless you.